Hello, everyone, once again out there in the digital world, and welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later, episode 7, I think? Let me count them in my head. Yes, episode 7. Welcome to episode 7, everyone. How exciting. This is your awkward, kooky host, Jordan. I hope you all had a pleasant weekend. I wonder if any of you went and saw Charlie's Angels. I don't think too many of you did. After I review these movies over the weekend, I like to check back in on Monday and see how the movie's faring. Charlie's Angels is not faring too well at the box office, but it is getting better reviews than Terminator, which is a nice change. No one's ragging on a movie that I said was good, which is always good. But yeah, it just looks like no one's going to see this movie, which is unfortunate. If you do have some spare time and you do want to see Charlie's Angels, I would highly recommend popping out and seeing it in the movie theater. These movies deserve a chance to be seen on the big screen. They're there, they're waiting for you. Don't just think, maybe I'll go, because you'll miss your opportunity. If no one goes see it, out it goes, and they'll play another showing of The Room, starring Tommy Wiseau. And how many times can we watch The Room? Apparently, every 4th month at my local cinema. So yeah, Charlie's Angels. Check it out. Wasn't bad, I promise. But here I am. I'm rather excited, as I promised last week. This is a very special episode. 2019 is drawing to a close, and I'm seeing as many movies as I can, working on my top 10 movies of 2019. But to give you an idea of what that's going to look like at the end of the year, I thought, tell you what, let's do the top 10 movies of 2018. Let's see what that list was like. And then how I deliver this and how it's received will certainly dictate how I present 2019 top 10 films. I have a certain love for making lists. During 2018 last year, I think I made a potential top 10 list about 46 times. It's an odd obsession of mine, but it is something that brings me a lot of joy. I do love looking back on all the movies I've seen, remembering what I enjoyed about them, what could have been better. It's interesting when a movie sits with you for a while, you sort of dwell on it a bit, and suddenly the movie can be 100 times better than what you realized. A sneak peek for 2019, it won't be on my top 10 list, but I saw the reboot of Hellboy this year. First viewing, couldn't stand it. Thought it was absolutely atrocious. I went out of there disappointed, angry, but then of course, a few months later, it comes out on DVD. In a reckless move of mine, I bought it to give it a rewatch. And I found myself really enjoying it a second time around. I think because, again, I had sat with it and allowed myself to appreciate what Hellboy actually was, which was just a dumb comic book movie designed to entertain through silly, stupid action and bizarre spectacle. It's slowly climbing up there for me. It certainly won't be in the top 10. Don't expect it to be there. But Hellboy, David Harbour, all the people who worked on it, I apologize for the thoughts in my brain. I know you didn't hear them, but I wasn't giving you guys much credit. And now I think, hang on a minute, what a cool movie. So it'll be interesting. You can follow along with me. 2018 wasn't too long ago. Maybe you remember what movies came out. Maybe you have your own top 10 list. Hopefully you're anxiously listening to see if your favourite movies are on this list. I hope they are, but I also hope that there might be some movies on this list you'd never heard of that you might then consider watching, or movies that you didn't think were too good, but on a brief evaluation from yours truly, maybe you might give it another chance. As I said before, I will never force my opinions on anybody, but this is more positive than negative, this channel. For my top 10 list, I also have some honourable mentions. Now, if you watch something like Watch Mojo, their countdowns also have honourable mentions. You usually have about 3 or 4 honourable mentions, I think. My list has 12, which is too many. But hey, if there's one thing I love, it's movies and telling people that I love movies. And as it's my show, if I want to have 12 honourable mentions, I'm going to have 12 honourable mentions. And I hope you enjoy listening to those 12 honourable mentions. These won't be reviews of the top 10 movies. I won't spend too long talking about each one. I'll announce it. I'll give you a brief rundown of what the plot is. Very, very brief. Again, I would love people to experience these movies without knowing too much. I'll say why I liked it, and then I'll move on. We'll be counting down from 10 to 1. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Coming in at number 10 for me was On the Basis of Sex. And I can guarantee most people will not know what I'm talking about when I say that movie. On the Basis of Sex came out towards the end of 2018, but I caught it early 2019. It still counts as a 2018 film, so let's not get into semantics here, because we could be here all day. On the Basis of Sex is basically a telling of the story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is a very famous Supreme Court Justice, lovely lady. I do love these movies that dictate historical stories. It's nice to have a movie tell me something that happened in real life. And it's always interesting to see how things are changed for the big screen. But basically, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is played by Felicity Jones, and the story is of her trying to basically just get accepted as a lawyer in the realm of law, in the field that she's desperately trying to break into. During the time she was making it in the job, I think it was the early 70s, but I'm not 100% sure, and I won't get too caught up on that. But doors were getting shut in her face left, right, and center. She couldn't get a job anywhere because, as we once believed, women belonged in the kitchen, and men should have been the ones out there being lawyers and whatnot. Her husband is played by Armie Hammer in a delightful role, because I believe in real life as well, Dame Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband was also very supportive of her. And he's very supportive of her in this movie, as she takes on a case where a man is discriminated against because of his gender, and she uses that to build on that to hopefully make things better for women in the workplace and in all across the world as well. It's a very uplifting movie. It's very sweet. It's very powerful. It was a joy to watch Felicity Jones in this role and overcome the obstacles that came before her. And that's why it is my number 10. There are certainly certain other films as well that could have been number 10. Number 10 is very interchangeable. But when it came down to it, On the Basis of Sex was a surprise hit for me. So it deserved to be on this list. Number 9. Another surprise movie that I didn't know about until word of mouth told me about it. Black Klansman. Black Klansman is a very interesting movie, very entertaining in some of the darkest ways possible. Again, it is another historical retelling of a movie about an African-American police officer who somehow, against all odds, manages to infiltrate the absolute fuckers, and that's my one swear word for this podcast, the Ku Klux Klan. John David Washington, son of Denzel Washington, plays this role. Of course, in real life, he could not physically go and talk to these Ku Klux Klan members. So he enlists a fellow police officer who is a white male, Adam Driver. However, this white male was also Jewish. So it was risky on all counts for everybody involved here. As I said, it is very entertaining and quite funny. And for the themes that they're addressing here, that is an impressive feat. Because there are times where it's absolutely disgusting, the things that are being discussed in this movie and shown. But you still have such a good time with John David Washington's character as he hoodwinks these absolute bastards. It's so great. It's an entertaining film. Directed by Spike Lee. I've not seen too many Spike Lee films, but I want to now after watching this film. Topher Grace also plays the head of the Ku Klux Klan. You never want to be remembered for playing a terrible person, but hats off to Topher Grace because he was also fantastic in the role. Moving on to number 8. Isle of Dogs, an animated film directed by Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson is a favourite of mine as a director. He's not for everyone. He has a certain unique style to his movies. You may have seen some of them. He's done The Grand Budapest Hotel. Not too many animated films. He has done Fantastic Mr. Fox before, which again has the same sort of style. He centers directly on his characters, and he has them talk directly to you in the camera. They turn completely 90 degrees sideways to talk to each other. It's a very unique feel, and it's very vibrant, I think. It's enjoyable to watch Wes Anderson movies. Isle of Dogs is no different. It's an animated movie about an island near Japan. Somehow Japan, I believe, passes a law which sends all dogs out to live on this island, ejected from society as it is. One lone boy makes it to the island looking for a specific dog, and a group of dogs help him look for this dog. It is a fantastic voice cast. Bryan Cranston is my favourite in this film. He's an absolute standout as a grumpy, snarky, bitter dog that eventually warms up to this boy that he encounters. As it is a Wes Anderson film, Wes Anderson has certain actors that he relies on to consistently appear in his movies, and they are all here, as per usual. Bill Murray, Edward Norton, they all play a different dog with a different type of personality that still fits the comedy of that person doing the voice. It is very entertaining, but it's not a comedy or a kids film, which is a unique aspect for it. It's its own thing. It's very serious in certain cases. But for an animated film to really impress me, it just leads to look incredible as well. And Isle of Dogs has that Wes Anderson vibe that looks so delightful to see. Even these mangy, grotty dogs that are living on this island, they still look delightful to see on the big screen. Isle of Dogs, again, is another movie I was not prepared for. I heard that it was good. I didn't get around to seeing it till it was out on DVD. And boy, did I wish I'd gone to the cinema to see it. It was a movie that deserved to be experienced on the big screen. And that's why it secures number 7 of my top 10 movies. Coming in at number 7, Black Panther. Of course, an MCU film. Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. It don't take much for me to enjoy them. But there was something special about Black Panther. And I think it has a lot to do with the buzz that surrounded this movie. In terms of what it means for African American culture in the film industry, for African culture. It was the right step forward. It really stood on its own as a standalone movie, while of course being the 18th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It still manages to tell its own story that doesn't rely on you seeing the other 17 films. Expertly directed by Ryan Coogler and featuring a fantastic costume design depicting a vibrant world that is Wakanda, Black Panther is about King T'Challa, who is the superhero Black Panther, but who has been newly anointed king and is trying to live up to his father's legacy, but also dealing with the fallout from his father's legacy. Specifically, the villain he encounters, Killmonger, played expertly by Michael B. Jordan. Michael B. Jordan is an absolute favourite actor of mine, and he's going to come up later. Just wait and see. Black Panther is a fun movie that crisscrosses several parts of the globe. It has some good action, some good CGI. Establishing the world of Wakanda means getting to know the different tribes and how they operate as a kingdom, and it really engrossed you in their world. It was so entertaining to watch, and also got you super hyped for another movie that was coming in just a couple months later. But I won't go into that movie just now. Perhaps it'll come up later. Haha. A clue. Black Panther, solid film, number 7. Number 6, this is where we get into some films that I definitely was prepared for. Deadpool 2. You may notice as we move ahead in this podcast that boy do I love superhero movies. I don't love them all, and I understand why people don't like them. I respect it. I think it's just my favourite type of genre, I think, with the superhero and the action and how they take the comic book stories onto the big screen. But what I will say about Deadpool is he's certainly a unique comic book character. If you have seen the film, you know that Deadpool is someone who is aware that he is in a movie. He breaks the fourth wall an awful lot. His first movie was a surprise hit. To even be made was a surprise, because who knows how that test footage got leaked? Ryan Reynolds. But however it did, it was popular enough for a Deadpool movie to be made, and it took off by storm, leading, of course, to our sequel. Deadpool is also a wisecracking mercenary. He has a delightful girlfriend, and he's just living his life when somehow, through no fault of his own, he gets caught up in this story involving a time-traveling mutant called Cable, played by Josh Brolin, involving this kid and what this kid means to the future. Deadpool not necessarily wants to protect this kid, but somehow he just keeps getting caught up in all this stuff that's going on around him. It is a delightful action film. It is extremely funny. Ryan Reynolds is a delight as Deadpool. He is so entertaining to watch in these movies, and he did not disappoint me again in this one. Pulling my comic book lore out as well, they gave us Task Force X, which is another type of X-Men team, leading to one of the best sequences I've ever seen in a movie, which is where these Task Force X members jump out of a plane to parachute down. I won't say what happens during this parachute sequence, but it is absolutely hilarious, and it is worth checking out just for that scene alone. For number 5, this might be conflicting for some people. I know there's some history behind this film, and rightly so. And in terms of the Academy Awards and everything like that, some people might not be brave enough to admit that they do like this film, and that's okay. But number 5 for me is Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't like too much music because I don't really know much about music. I've certainly heard songs. I couldn't tell you who sung a song, but you play that song for me and I can say, oh yeah, I've heard it. Queen is an exception. I have grown up listening to Queen. I love their music and I love Freddie Mercury. So a movie about Freddie Mercury and Queen was guaranteed I was going to enjoy. I mean, you've got the Queen songs in it alone was enough to have me sitting up in my seat having a great time. But it wasn't just that really cemented this movie for me. It was Rami Malek's portrayal as Freddie Mercury. Rami Malek just embraced the character wholeheartedly. There was a point where you didn't know where he ended and Freddie began, I think, which was truly impressive. The movie had me all over the place in terms of emotions. Obviously, if you're familiar with Freddie Mercury and what was going on for him behind the scenes and his eventual end of life, it is a very sad tale. But it is also very uplifting for most of the film as they have Queen come together and make it big and come up with all their different songs. We Will Rock You. Another one, Bites the Dust. The Show Must Go On is played in the credits and it is enough to have me weeping, that's for sure. Now I understand that technically Bryan Singer's name is on this movie for directing it, and Bryan Singer is not a good man. I won't go into why he is, but I don't want to say I support anything that he's ever done. But it isn't fair on all the other people that worked on Bohemian Rhapsody. Dexter Fletcher, who took over and directed Bohemian Rhapsody, I really think you can feel his hold on it, especially if you go and see Rocketman, which came out this year with Elton John. The movies feel the same, and I think it's because Dexter Fletcher took over and really rescued this movie. But if you're looking for a fantastic musical with, again, history, so you can learn a bit about Queen and whatnot, it certainly takes liberties. I'm not saying that it is a 100% accurate portrayal of Queen, but a top 10 movie for me doesn't have to be historically accurate 100%. It just has to be a movie that I enjoyed and will watch over and over again. And I will watch Bohemian Rhapsody over and over again, that is for sure. Fun facts for you, if you want to go on YouTube and watch a side-by-side comparison of the performance Queen gave. Oh god, I'm not remembering what the performance was. It's a big one. I believe it was for Africa. God, it's escaping me. Live Aid. There it is, Live Aid. If you go on and watch a side-by-side comparison of Live Aid performed at the end of this movie and the real-life version of Live Aid, it's astounding how on point that particular performance is. Hats off to Bohemian Rhapsody. Fantastic time. Loved it. But we pull forward now into our top 4. Hopefully people have heard their movies come through. Maybe they're still waiting for their movies to be said. Hopefully I can not disappoint you. Number 4 is a special one for me. I don't think too many people will agree with me, but it's my list, so it's my choice. And that is Creed 2. Creed is a delight for me. When it came out in 2015, the first one, I had to go and see it by myself because it did not have a good trailer. At that point, no one was expecting the Rocky films or the Rocky universe to be particularly enjoyable. They had scraped the well dry, as it were. It was incredible how much I loved that movie, and I think it's in part to Michael B. Jordan, who portrays Adonis Creed, the son of Apollo Creed, who is the famously Rocky's first opponent in the first 2 Rocky Balboa films. So naturally, I was very excited for Creed 2 and a little apprehensive because the main plot of Creed 2 is a sequelish of sorts to Rocky 4, which has a notorious reputation, where Rocky essentially takes on communism. And of course, wins because USA, and so on and so forth. So the idea that Creed would face the son of the Russian that Rocky fought in Rocky 4 sounded so silly that I was terrified they were going to ruin what made Creed 1 so good, which was that real simpleness of just Adonis Creed wanting to move out of his dad's shadow and make a name for himself. Boy, was I surprised at how much the movie stuck to that theme. With what was going for it, it's impressive that they made what they did. The story, I guess, is a bit predictable, you could say. Creed, of course, hits rock bottom and has to pull himself back up. But I love boxing films, and I love a good montage, a good training montage. Seeing Creed go through that montage. His chemistry with Tessa Thompson, who plays his girlfriend in this, also fantastic. Sylvester Stallone gives a humbling performance as a very, very, very old Rocky, but he doesn't try to steal the spotlight or make the movie about him facing the Russians again, which is great. Watching it in the cinema with that final boxing match, when the Rocky theme swelled up, I was there. I was having such a good time. Creed 2 did not disappoint, and that's why it's up there in my top 4. Number 3 is Mission Impossible Fallout. Mission Impossible Fallout has jumped around this list for me, always at the top end, because it was such a fun time as an action film, as a high point for the Mission Impossible movies. I wasn't too into the Mission Impossible films when they first started. They were fine. I just didn't care too much, I suppose. Around the 4th one, Ghost Protocol, I think they started to find their form. Ghost Protocol was very enjoyable, and they latched onto that specific team, that Mission Impossible group led by Tom Cruise, with Simon Pegg and Ving Rhames, where it just became such an entertaining ride to see Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt doing these extreme stunts that he's obviously doing in real life. But the stories themselves as well, they were gritty, they were real. Fallout was a return to action films that we have not seen in a long time. Action films that don't rely on big CGI green screens and that sort of thing. People really fly helicopters, they climb cliffs. The music is intense and fast. The action never lets up. You really don't know what's going to happen. It was an enjoyable time, to be sure. I think I overhyped this movie too much when I was recommending it to people, but I also couldn't recommend this movie enough. You don't have to have seen any of the Mission Impossible movies to appreciate Mission Impossible Fallout, which is always a good point for a movie that is the 6th installment in a franchise. If you're not able to get people to jump on at a certain point, which is hard, but to achieve that goal, fantastic. I haven't gone too much into the Mission Impossible plot, because I don't want to spoil too much of it. But essentially, if I could sum it up in a few words, it's stop nuclear bombs from going off. There is a final fight scene to stop these nuclear bombs going off, with helicopters dangling off the side of a cliff, where Tom Cruise has to rely on his team to help him. And it is an entertaining thrill ride that can't be beat. Fantastic. Well done, Mission Impossible Fallout. I love you. Number 2, another animated film, perhaps not too surprising, because it is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. When I said I love animated movies because they are vibrant and they look good, this movie absolutely knocks it out of the park. I believe this movie should have been nominated for an Academy Award for these specific things. As I mentioned in a previous episode, it was only nominated for Best Animated Film, but it did win. That's how much even the Academy agrees with me that this movie was fantastic. It's an animated Spider-Man film that doesn't rely on you watching any other Spider-Man films. It's a self-contained story involving Miles Morales, a fantastic new Spider-Man. I wouldn't say he's too new now, but for people watching the movies, you're obviously familiar with Peter Parker. Well, Miles Morales is his own thing. He, of course, gets bitten by a spider, becomes Spider-Man, and the movie essentially is his journey into becoming that superhero. But to give it that little extra twist, because it is Into the Spider-Verse, he ends up interacting with Spider-Man from different realities. There's, of course, Peter Parker. Haley Steinfeld's in here as a Spider-Woman. She's fantastic. Spider-Man from the 30s, a real box-em-up bruiser. And even a pig, Peter Porker, voiced fabulously by John Mulaney. While this movie looks fantastic, it also has so much heart. There's a lot of emotion going on in here. This movie isn't afraid to get real when it needs to. It really has the emotions flowing when it wants to. And it can really lift your spirits at certain points. There is a scene in this movie involving what I'll only say as a leap of faith. The way the animation combines with the music, combined with the story that they're telling, it is absolutely incredible. That alone is worth seeing this movie, but in general, you should see this movie overall. Even if you just like Jake Johnson from New Girl, Jake Johnson's in here. Give it a go just for him if you want to, and then thank me later because you will love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Before I unveil my top pick, I'm going to give you my honourable mentions. As I said, there are 12 of them, so buckle in. Maze Runner, The Death Cure, the final film in the young adult movie series that was surprisingly entertaining. A Quiet Place, structurally a fantastically well-executed movie involving very little sound. Ocean's 8, a reboot of the Oceans franchise with an all-female cast, entertaining. Incredibles 2, the long-awaited sequel to The Incredibles, did not disappoint. Ant-Man and the Wasp, MCU, kicking it again. Paul Rudd is a fantastic Ant-Man, and the Wasp was a great sidekick for him. Christopher Robin, coming at me from a childhood. I love Winnie the Pooh. Seeing him in real life with Ewan McGregor was sensational. Venom, because surprisingly I didn't expect to even like this movie at all, and I enjoyed it for what it was, which was Tom Hardy. First Man, a visually stunning look at Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. Looks incredible. Goosebumps 2, Haunted Halloween. Just simple fun. Don't expect too much out of it, but surprisingly hilarious. Ralph Breaks the Internet. Disney is always good with their animated films. Plus Ralph does some things where he tries to become an internet sensation. Open Sesabees for all those people who understand. Aquaman. Jason Momoa looks incredible, I'm told. I would concur. For a surprisingly actually upbeat, vibrant and entertaining, not grim DC movie. And finally, Bumblebee. Because it was about time we got a Transformers movie that wasn't 4 hours long and devastating to the eyeballs. Bumblebee was a delightful, happy experience. But here we go, my number one film, and I'm pretty sure you could probably guess it because it has been on the list now, and if you've been living under a rock, you would know what type of movies have really been all up in the air with buzz. That's right, number one, Avengers Infinity War. Avengers Infinity War I had been waiting for many years, as the MCU was releasing film after film after film. I saw that movie quite a few times in one day. I was worried that it might have bitten off more than it could chew, but it flawlessly handled all the characters that they brought into this movie from all the different franchises. All the superheroes, of course, play off each other brilliantly. Everyone has their own personality, and they work well, of course, with the people they had already met. And then introducing superheroes to who they hadn't met before. Iron Man and Doctor Strange together. A snark-off that was fantastic. Thor meeting up with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Hilarious, as always. And of course, special props to Josh Brolin as the evil Thanos. A villain that had so much depth that you could say the movie was essentially about him and his quest for the 6 Infinity Stones, which he was going to use to wipe out half the life in all the universe. The action doesn't stop from the moment it starts. There are so many good action scenes. CGI looks flawless up to this point. You could almost believe this was happening in real life. Everything comes to a head in a surprisingly upsetting way and just left you shocked and mesmerized for what was promised to be part 2, which of course came out in 2019. I wonder what could be my favorite film of 2019. Hard to say. You'll just have to listen to find out, but maybe you could probably guess. Who knows? There's still some months left. Things could change. Infinity War was an absolutely sensational movie. I will always remember where I was when I watched it, and that is why it is my number 1 film of 2018. Thank you all once again for joining me. This has been a longer episode than normal, but we covered a lot of ground here, I think. Hopefully your favourite movies were mentioned. Hopefully you've heard some movies and gone, maybe that's worth looking at. Maybe. Maybe you're upset that your movie wasn't mentioned. Maybe you're upset that I've mentioned a movie that you think shouldn't have been mentioned. That's great. I hope your mind's at racing. I hope you're thinking. If you are listening to me on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment on what you think your favourite movies of 2018 were. Feel free to make your own list if you want to. Hey, if you got the time, why not? If you're listening on Spotify, of course you can't do that. But perhaps as you go off to your work or to your holidays or whatever you're driving to or whatever, you might engage, chat with other people and see what movies out there are just fantastic. As you've seen from this list, in my opinion, a goddamn lot of them. Before I wrap up, a quick shout out to a friend of mine, Pat, who I don't see very often, who I saw last weekend, who informed me that he was listening to my podcast. I love you, man. Thank you for doing that. And good luck on your upcoming wedding. I'm very excited to share that with you, and apparently every single other person listening on this podcast. I love and appreciate you as always. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll wrap up now with a week break. I'll see you next week. I'll be talking about 12 Angry Men, but using that as well to talk about classic films and discussing whether or not people today still enjoy those movies. You've been spliced in later. Hope you enjoyed 2018. Happy 2019. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.